Fantastic. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nick Hillman. I'm the director of HEPI, the Higher Education Policy Institute, which is an Oxford-based think tank. And I'm talking to you today from HEPI Towers, which is one room in Oxford. And you can see all our publications behind us, some of which have been produced in the past in conjunction with our partners on this webinar today, the UPP Foundation. And in a moment, I'm going to hand over to Richard Brabner, the Executive Chair of the UPP Foundation. But just to remind you of some of the housekeeping for today. So the topic we've got today for this webinar is Future Ready Students, How to Embed Employability and Civic Engagement in Higher Education. It's, I believe, an uber topical issue. For example, we published a report last week by Professor Edward Peck, the incoming chair of the Office for Students, which talked about the whole concept of service learning and being accredited for doing employment-focused and labour market-focused things as part of your course. And of course, the real trigger for today is the Energy Advice Centre that we're going to hear from the LSBU and the UPP Foundation have been establishing, and others are now jumping on board as well. And there's a toolkit we're going to hear from to have far more institutions jump on board on that. But we're also going to talk about the issue in a more general sense because there's lots of legal advice centres and other employer-focused elements here as well. So we've got a lot of ground to cover. We've got a hard cut-off at 2 o'clock. We've got lots of speakers. After Richard, we're going to hear from Ben Lishman, who's been behind the initiative at LSBU, and he's Associate Dean for Students there. And he's brought, I'm very pleased to say, 2 LSBU students, Jude and Esther, along with him to this virtual room. And then we're going to have, after their presentation, a panel with some responses from Christina Kerwin, who's Director of the Energy Advice Unit at London South Bank University and a PhD student there, from Lynn Bianchi at the University of Manchester, of where I am an alum, and I should declare an interest, a governor as well, though they're about to kick me off because I've done my 9 years. And then Martin Edmondson, Chief Executive Officer of AGCAS, the Association of Graduate Careers Advisory Services. So I will give them brief introductions as we go as well. But Richard, over to you. And Richard, we were all, I think, devastated to see that you're off to pastures new soon, because your work at the UPP Foundation, of which this is part, has been so influential. I think of the Civic University Commission. I think of your Student Futures project during COVID. I think of all the work you did with Bob Kerslake and remembering Bob Kerslake after his sad death quite recently. So it's a huge honour to be able to be doing this work with you today. And I know you were going to make some introductory remarks too. And so just before I pass to Richard, the only other thing I want to say is this is an on-the-record event. We are recording it. We will make the recording available afterwards. And there will be, after the presentations, an opportunity to put questions to all our speakers today. So enough from me. Over to you, Richard.
Thanks, Nick, and those words are far too kind, but thank you. And it's really pleased to be able to do this webinar with HEPI and LSBU. As a lot of people, I suppose, on this call know, the UPP Foundation really loves the civic agenda, but also how it can engage with the student experience and engaging with that service learning piece, which came out so strongly, something that could really enhance the student experience in our Student Futures Commission too. And so that's what's really inspired this webinar and the case study really today with the absolutely fabulous student-led Energy Advice Centre at LSBU. And they first applied for funding from the UPP Foundation about 3 years ago for this project. And, we loved it from the start. We thought that taking a key issue such as high energy costs affecting lots of people in all across the country in local communities and coming up with practical solutions using the skills of students and staff at LSBU was just a no-brainer for us to support. It's great for local communities. And as Ben may mention in a bit, they suggest that they've saved over £75,000 of energy bills for local residents through the Energy Advice Centre. It's absolutely amazing for students. It gives them sort of graduate level skills while also being paid to do this, which is obviously a key issue given the student experience at the moment. And it's great for the university, obviously demonstrating the positive impact that higher education can have on the places that it's part of. And it's really the fact that off the back of our project, and funding Southwark Council have used this as their energy advice centre and supporting LSBU further is really testament to that too. So, and today we're really thrilled to be announcing a further £70,000 grant to expand the energy advice centres at Reading, Wrexham and Kingston universities, continuing this project to be led by the LSBU team. This grant is part of our growth fund, where we will look to expand projects which were previously supported to grow them at other universities. And aligned to this announcement, we've also today published a toolkit with LSBU, authored by Ben and Chris from the team at LSBU, to encourage other universities to think about how they could set up an energy advice centre at their university. And now we know that lots of universities now run legal advice centres, and the EACs essentially were based on that particular model. So we hope that in time we can really create a movement of sorts with student-led energy advice centres all across the country, supporting local residents to save on their energy bills while also helping the environment at the same time. As I said, we're really pleased to co-host this webinar with HEPI, using the EACs as really a great case study for the impact of service learning on communities and the student experience. So over to you, Nick. Really looking forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you, Nick. Well, I'm going to pass straight over to Ben. Ben, is this win-win-win, as Richard said? Good for students, good for universities, and good for the environment?
This is win-win-win, Nick. You've stolen my conclusion already there, but absolutely. I'm going to share my screen and show a few slides which give a summary of what's in the toolkit and what we're trying to do. So let's do that. So I hope people can see that screen sharing and jump on.
We can.
Fantastic, thank you. So at the start of the toolkit we've written, we list almost as an introduction some of the ways in which our Energy Advice Centre has made a difference for the university, as Nick said, for the community, and particularly for our students. And that's what I've got on the screen right now. This is our kind of headline package. We find students who want to make a difference and who believe in sustainability. We pay them to do that within the university and in service of our community in South London. And we think it's win-win-win. Okay. So this is how it works. You contact us, or you come to our clinic or drop in on a Thursday morning and you ask us for advice. And it can be very broad. You could just say, I'd like to improve my domestic energy. I'd like to reduce my heating bills. It can also be quite specific. I spoke to somebody recently at an outreach event who said to me her energy bills had just gone up, and she wasn't sure if it was the cost of charging her mobility scooter or whether it was her son's new gaming computer that they were paying for in a new way. That's the kind of question we love to answer. We've got students who can look into that and tell you exactly what's going on there, and we did. Our students do the research, and they're supported in that by technical experts from across the university. That's PhD students, academic staff, whoever is the right person with the right know-how. No, that's who we bring in. And then we send a written response within 2 weeks. So that's the kind of mechanism for it all. And if you're interested, search for us and fill in our form and ask us some questions about how to reduce your heating bills, and we'd love to answer them. The photo you see here is us on day one in January 2023, the day we opened, and you'll see above us there, if you've got good eyesight, you may see that we're sharing space with our legal advice clinic. And as Richard's already mentioned, that kind of model from legal advice clinics is really something that we've been using throughout. So one thing that I've really found with the Energy Advice Centre the whole time we've been running it is a kind of sense of if you build it, they will come. And as soon as we got started, we have people getting in touch to talk about ways they wanted to partner with us. Richard's already mentioned that we're Southwark Council's official Green Home Service. We also work with Croydon Healthy Homes, and they've been giving advice to our students on how to work. And I think the idea is that universities thrive on connections, and the Energy Advice Centre can be a kind of focal point for lots of sustainability related issues. As a recent example, we've been approached by some architects who are working on a national lottery project, renovating a lodge in Nunhead Cemetery, and they'd like some energy advice and also some student participation. So that's a new link for the university, and it's turned into a live brief for our architecture students and our product design students, which has been great. We work closely with our heating and cooling group here. They're the heart of our technical expertise. And the Energy Advice Centre adds an extra string to their bow as well. And really, we're becoming embedded in our community. We've given advice to local businesses, to local schools, to local health centres, and that's something that feels important for our university. So a part of what we're talking about today is scaling up and the potential to do this at more universities, which we would absolutely love. There are network effects here that can only happen if we have a number of universities. So, for example, we keep a shared database of all the advice that we've given, and we can kind of repurpose that as we need it. If there are 4 or 10 or 50 energy advice centres, that database gets so much richer, I think. And the bigger group can also start to see new avenues to explore. When we went to speak to Reading University, their student union president was interested that there are, for students in private houses, there are some energy tariffs, which he was worried didn't seem terribly fair. And so they're kind of taking a campaigning view of that, and going to see if they can work to change things for their students. That wasn't something that we were doing, but it's something now that we're really interested in. So there are many directions that I think this can go in, and the bigger group will again lead to those network effects. So please do have a look at the toolkit. Please feel free to get in touch. I put my email address up on the screen there in case it's helpful, and you'll have all of our contact details. But we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to work with you. It's really the message here. And a huge thank you to the UPP Foundation for supporting us right from day one. We couldn't have done it without them, and we're extremely grateful. At that point, I'd like to try and bring in, if we can, Jude and Esther, who are 2 of our students working in the centre right now. Jude and Esther, are you there?
Yep, just trying to turn the camera on.
Fantastic, thank you. I know Esther had some sound difficulties earlier, so I'll give her a second and I'll go straight to you, Jude, and say, could you just give us a summary of your experience in the Energy Advice Centre, how it's been so far, and how you think it might affect your future?
Yeah, so
Ben, do you want to stop? But sorry to interrupt. Ben, do you want to stop sharing your screen so that people can see Jude and interact? Do you think that might work best? Great. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Right, so I'm in the marketing team at the EAC. So my main responsibilities is just preparing and posting content across a few platforms. So we've got a LinkedIn, an Instagram, and a Twitter, which we mainly use. I've also done a bit of advice, and I've run a few pop-up stores over the past 2 years that we've done as well. And that kind of links into my first point about how it benefits students, which is that the organization is like so open. So once you're in and you've got the job, you can kind of delve into multiple areas, and everyone's really receptive to that and really helps you with that. So I've been able to do quite a few things since joining. I also have a background in film, so I was able to make a promo video for the EAC. And that's also that the staff are very like supportive of you, and they'll kind of push you towards opportunities. Like once I'd made that video, I was then able to take on 2 more video jobs within the university that Christina kind of found for me. So that's one way it really benefits too, even like within and without the Energy Advice Centre itself. And then lastly, that Richard touched on is that we are paid for our time. So, you know, there's a lot of sort of experience-based jobs out there that you kind of trade your time for the experience, whereas this kind of does work towards what students really need, which is often money. So it's good for that as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Jude. I'll just check. Esther, are you able to join us? I'm afraid that there might be technical issues for Esther. So Nick, I think I'll hand back to you if that's all right.
Great, thank you. Well, let's go. I'm going to go because I want to make sure there's enough time for Q&A, and there is a Q&A function open. So do please bring in and ask questions, which we can put to Ben and Jude, but also to our panel that we're now going to move over to. And the first person on our panel that we're going to have is Christina. And you should be able to see Christina now, and she's director of the EAU at London South Bank University and a PhD student. So another student. What's your PhD on, Christina?
Sustainable design of electronics.
Fantastic. So over to you.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you, everyone. Thank you for coming to this webinar. So I will focus, since Ben already introduced sort of logistics of the Energy Advice Centre and how it works, I'm going to focus more on student experience and service-based learning and what it means from the EAC perspective. So, as we already mentioned several times, students are officially employed through paid roles, which greatly enhance their CVs and also helps with the cost of living. For me, as volunteering director, because I'm also a PhD student, the role gave me an opportunity to gain experience in all basic practical leadership skills I wouldn't normally be able to exercise otherwise in a paid sort of employment. So it's great for my CV. For other executive roles that are filled by PhD students, such as technical director, it's also an opportunity to gain experience in mentoring students and applying their PhD level technical knowledge to real world sustainability issues. For our students in general, I think it's an opportunity to gain hands-on experience while supporting local communities and working and doing something meaningful, as well as applying their academic knowledge to real-world challenges. So it's sort of, again, win-win-win. At the same sort of time, students develop also transferable skills. So it's not just applying their knowledge, they also learn things like research and report writing, which is quite important for academic side and also in the future work placements. Quality control is quite important, client-based communication, working as a team and team management. Because we keep our students till they graduate until they actually get employment in the real world. And we do that because the biggest challenge is recruitment. As you probably all know, students tend to graduate. So we do have quite a high turnover. And keeping alumni means our previous cohort is there to train and manage the new recruits, so they can actually also add team management to their CVs, which is great. So we kind of create this continuous flow of knowledge. At the moment, we have quite diverse skill sets. We've got a few graduates, we've got master students and got bachelor students. They come from different backgrounds, obviously, as you mentioned, film and media studies. We also have product designers, mechanical, chemical, ICT engineers, and the engineering students tend to lean towards technical advice side, so they're working behind the scenes, whilst media and design students work on marketing and outreach and social media platforms. But as Jude mentioned, we don't constrain them to any particular role. If students want to try their skills in a different role and learn a new skill, it's just great. They're welcome to. When we recruit, we look for not mainly for skill sets they have, but actually I look out for three key qualities, which is main one is reliability, so I can rely on a person, dedication and commitment. Anything else, I believe, can be learned. So any background is welcome. So because it's a transferable skills based role, everything is a learning curve. So as long as they have those three qualities. So our success is really in boosting student confidence by strengthening their CVs, and so they're ready when they graduate. They have a better standing in the employment and labour market once they graduate. And ESC is not just a student-led project that offers practical energy solution. We sort of deliver real impact on all fronts. We help local communities. We contribute towards sustainability and climate action. And the main thing is we offer practical quality education to our students, which enhances their employability as they graduate. So our alumni progress to PhDs. We have students in energy roles and students that go into sustainability roles. What we aim for, as we mentioned before, is to have energy advice at every university in the UK, and really because it's online-based service, it's not constrained by borders, so eventually it could maybe roll out internationally. And again, we've created toolkits so the project can be replicated, and which I believe is going live today. So thank you for listening.
Fantastic.
That's me.
Thank you.
That's EAC.
Yeah, fantastic. And we are, there is a link to the toolkit somewhere in the chat or that Richard's put in. So anyone who wants to see the toolkit can go there. Lots of questions are coming in, which is fantastic. And I'm looking forward to putting them to the people we've heard from. So with no further ado now, I'm going to go to our other two introductory speakers. First, Lynn Bianchi from the University of Manchester. Lynn has to leave 10 minutes before the end to go to a very important other meeting. So if you've got questions you particularly want to put to Lynn, please signal that when you type the question, and do upvote other people's questions so you know which ones, I know which ones you most want answered. Lynn, over to you.
Thank you, Nick, and hello everybody. So I'm going to give a bit of an insight into what we're doing here at the University of Manchester. Made a few notes. I've not got slides, so you can just enjoy just having to listen. So we at the University of Manchester have seen that service learning has been strongly an area of interest over the past number of years. Here, with everything that we're doing, we're asking, what are we here for? What is the purpose of the graduate experience, and what defines a Manchester graduate? I'm sure similar to other institutions. And here we often think about societal impact in the UK, mainly via research impact, RF, and the work that goes on in that space. Whereas when we're thinking around service learning, it's very much tipping our thinking into social impact from our teaching and learning side of things, which is a lot newer, as you can well understand. And it's often thinking about what our students are going on to do later. So it's really great to hear Christina talking about those increased employability skills and the labour market outcomes related to obviously TEF and other areas. So we have been working in this space for quite a number of years. FSC, which is the faculty that I sit within, Faculty of Science and Engineering, less experienced, you might say, than our other two faculties. But I'm going to give you a flavour of where our thinking is currently at as we shift up the scale of service learning to potentially an institutionally wide approach. And this really stems from our values at the university, which transcend knowledge, wisdom, humanity, courage, academic freedom. I'm sure, Nick, you know those very well. And service learning speaks to all of those, doesn't it? And interestingly, we're playing a little bit with the terminology here as well. So lately we've been looking at how service learning can become more embracing of different areas of engagement with communities. And we're testing out the water with regard to something called PEL, partner-enabled learning. But we're shifting between the two at this point. So working across all of the different faculties, I'm going to give you a little bit of an insight in terms of what that looks like and might look like in future. combining community involvement, study and practical experience is exactly what we've just heard from colleagues. And that has very much been netted and embedded into our faculty of biology, medicine and health. And you can appreciate there that the impact has been very much made in a similar way that the people are giving advice for energy. But, you know, we've got our dentists, we've got our pharmacists, we've got our students across all of the health sciences, big populations of students who interact regularly through their course with GP practices, pharmacies, schools, charities, community groups and interest companies. And that's been an integral part of the work that they've been doing, that all undergraduates are doing in those courses. In our Faculty of Humanities, in a similar way, the Justice Hub is something that we've set up down here on Oxford Road. That works with many different projects and providing legal advice. So similar to the energy, but this is on basically very similar way of working, giving free legal help. And there's something called the Manchester Innocence Project that has been providing members of the community who would not otherwise be able to afford or access legal help to get that assistance by literally walking in the door or making contact with us. This ethos continues with the support of our students, really going and working mainly with not-for-profit organisations through consultancy projects. Even in our MBA, our full-time MBA students, our business students, they can work in consultancy teams, solving real challenges in the work that they're doing in those spaces. And then that sort of flips to what we've been doing here in Faculty of Science and Engineering. And I'll hold my hands up because I think we've been doing it and probably not calling it service learning for many a year. And it's interesting to hear the models that are coming through from other universities, and I'm keen to see what other people think. So the work that we've been doing here in the Faculty of Science and Engineering, particularly, for instance, with our fashion business technology students, they've been working with with the HUT group and other groups in their third and fourth years of study, looking at how we can improve and advise the fashion industry around environmental sustainability practices and how we can support them in tackling global challenges around fast fashion and pollution management. Now, these are all lovely stories to tell, but I'll be very honest and say that they are pockets of excellence in what is a very, very large institution. And so we've been challenged with the task, and my role here is Vice Dean for Social Responsibility and EDIA in the Faculty of Science Engineering, is to really consolidate the features, advantages and benefits of service learning across a whole faculty, which is as large as some universities, but as a university as a whole, and to look at how we can operate such activities for undergraduate and postgraduate taught students at scale. And I'm really keen to delve into how many people get involved and how other students are, numbers basically. So our current 2035 strategy is focused on the way that we can enhance flexible, personalised and digitally enabled learning. And that's really where our SL work's going to sit. We've sought consultation with our staff and student populations around the idea of belonging through collaboration. And we've got this vision of embedding service learning as a credit-bearing module within our signature Manchester curriculum. By integrating community service within classroom learning through partnerships with local organisations and industries, this proposal has been put forward as a real means to empower learners to tackle real-world challenges and develop that civic-minded leaders. So as we're working through this, our faculties are really bringing all of our different insights together and really starting to challenge ourselves in terms of how this will apply at scale. Clarifying the nature of the learning, the credit load applied within service learning units, whether it's 10 or 20 credits, the common or bespoke intended learning outcomes that are coming through from this, and the methods of assessment that can be applied so that it becomes an integral part of all teaching and learning, and obviously working with our disability service to make sure that we're making sure that this is an equitable and accessible offer for all. Of course, understanding the interests and needs of our community is also utmost. It's fair enough that we sit here and say we'd like to have this and it's a good to have, but what do our community organisations say? And a big question for us in the Faculty of Science and Engineering is who are our communities and who are our partners? Because as you can well understand, many of ours are profit-making industry partners in the STEM sector. So we're looking and exploring really what those relationships and those partners look like beyond charities and more evident civic community groups. So to this end, I'd just like to take a moment and really just throw out some questions to the group and maybe some stimulus for conversation, because we're taking a really pragmatic approach to this and thinking about service learning, whether it's a separate or integrated piece of learning for our students. You know, should we be working at scale? We've got 26,500 undergraduates. Is this a generic thing that they can opt into? Is this a standardized and mandated thing for all? Is it a project-based learning approach that we're going to take, which has got particularly, you know, core hours of study where we can adapt and change current accreditation requirements with learned bodies? That's a massive challenge when we're working with our School of Engineering. Relationships with public engagement. How does all of this work currently sit with public engagement, with business engagement, with our volunteering schemes? We're looking at really practical approaches in terms of what does it mean to work with AI and service learning, and how can we activate and mobilize service learning opportunities and use AI to streamline, whether it be the pragmatic logistics around this or some of the context for learning. The frequency of approach is really interesting as well. Do all students do it every year? Do all students have at least one opportunity? Which is the best year group for this to land in? Is that going to be the same for all? Assessment at scale. Who's best to assess? If we're saying this is landing with our community partners, are they the best people to tell us whether that our students have achieved and impacted, or does that fall back to our academics? We've not been down the road of talking about pay. At the moment, our students are not paid for their service. It is an integrated or voluntary part of their work. That's an interesting one to look at when working at scale. And then, of course, let's not forget the academic upskilling that's going to need to happen, and the community upskilling that's going to need to happen if we're going to maintain integrity within service learning, working across all the different disciplines across the university, but obviously here in FSE. So you can see from this short summary that the need for an institutionally wide approach, which draws on expertise developed within our health sciences areas of practice, and also allows us to breathe through the excitement and the toil of curriculum innovation at scale, is actually really exciting, and we're really on the cusp of that right at this point. We have to acknowledge student voices, their apprehensions and interests, and we've just met with a group of students I'll meet with more tomorrow, who are thinking about this being free work, and where does this lead to a protection of intellectual property if they're giving advice over sustainability, ideas, innovations, that kind of thing. They've got genuine considerations about what it means to be a student and how SL fits into that. So I'm coming to a close now, Nick. Starting with the why is somewhat easy. We want the win-win-win-win. Of course we do. We want our students learning and being active within society. Nobody would ever question that, but thrashing out what and how we get into that space at scale really has taken us outside our comfort zone and a leap into a new phase of learning. So I'm really delighted to be part of this and to learn with and through the experiences that colleagues have got on the call.
Great. Thank you so much, Lynn. And I think I can say as a board member of Manchester that I know it's a high priority of the fairly new Vice Chancellor, Duncan Iverson, and why it's such a big part of the 2035 strategy there. So now I'm going to go to our last speaker, and then I'm going to put the questions that are coming in thick and fast to the panelists. Martin, how does this look from sort of, you can helicopter out a bit because you're not inside an institution, you're representing, in a sense, all institutions via their career services and through ADCAS. So how does this look to you?
Thanks, Nick. And again, real pleasure to be here. And it's been great to hear about the examples so far about the Energy Centre and some of the things going on there at Manchester as well. So I'm from ADCAS. For those who don't know us, we're the community for everyone who works on careers and employability in higher education. We have about 5,000 members across the UK and Ireland. And I'm sort of relatively new to this role since the back end of last year, but having worked in the space of graduate employability and recruitment for quite a while. Now, I just want to make a couple of quick points. As Nick said, I'll try and zoom out a little bit really about the broader picture on embedding employability generally. And I've got 3 quick points to make because I know we want to get into Q&A, so I'll make them as quick as I can. I guess the first is that embedding employability, particularly in curriculum, is now the new normal. It's not a nice to have, it's not a kind of adjunct. It is very much the norm. And I guess one of the pieces of evidence for that, we just ran in April the first ever Academic Employability Awards, which were put together to try and draw out the examples that were going on of people, academics and career services working together to embed employability in curriculum at scale and in a kind of meaningful way. as far as we're aware, they're the first of those kind in the world. And we had an amazing response to that. We had 250 entries from 85 different universities. And the point there is not to talk about our awards so much, but more to talk about the fact that this shows that every kind of university at every kind of scale is now looking at how they embed employability in curriculum and how they make sure that the employability of students and graduates is delivered through courses. And this point about service learning and how that integrates with that is a really interesting area as well, I think, because one of the winners from our awards, for example, was Manchester Met, just down the road from Manchester, obviously, and who had their social science futures programme, which had a really interesting set of examples where they were working closely with the police service, the probation service. It was a credit-bearing module within curriculum, working with those partners, having an impact in the community, but also significantly showing evidence of improvement of career readiness and improved graduate outcomes from that support process embedded at scale within curriculum. So we know this stuff is working and we know it makes a difference, and we can see that it is very much the new normal now across pretty much any kind of institution. Second point I'd make is that embedding employability in curriculum is often seen as a kind of binary equation, and that's not actually a very helpful way of looking at it. It's seen as either you do it or you don't do it. And actually, it's perhaps more usefully viewed on a spectrum. And I think it's something that universities need to take a think about in terms of, and exactly as Lynn was just walking through that they're thinking about at Manchester at the moment, is how do you embed this in your curriculum in a way that makes sense for your institution or your course or your faculty, whatever level that is. I want to share a quick model super quickly to perhaps help you think about that. And the way that I've kind of come to think about this is the idea of a spectrum of embedding employability. So at one end of the spectrum, it has 4 points. At one end is passive. That might be your things like, you know, you're getting people in from industry to do some sort of group talks for your course and things like that. And there might be a bit of teamwork in the course, but you're not really extracting, if you like, the full employability and skills development value out of that. The second stage would be bolt-on. That would be the kind of classic thing where you have an employability module within a course, and that's a common model adopted by a lot of universities. A third model would be what's called extracted employability, which was pioneered by within the University of London with Kate Daubney, who developed this model where you take a lot of existing practice in courses and then pull out the employability development and the skills development that's taking place much more actively, whether that's through assessment or reflection. And then finally, intrinsic. And this is where you design your courses and your teaching and your assessment from the ground up with a view to developing employability skills throughout them. And that could be done with this service learning angle in mind as well. So I think the key thing for universities to think about on that spectrum is, where do we want to be on that spectrum? Where are we now? And how will we get from point A to point B? And that's a conversation you can have, as I say, at a course level, a faculty level, or a whole institutional level. And it's one that I know a lot of our members, particularly the career services, are driving those kind of conversations within universities everywhere at the moment. And my final point is just making sure that a lot of this ultimately gets centered on skills. Employers are now thinking very much in terms of skills-based hiring. They need students to be articulate about skills, to understand their own skills, to be very clear about the skills they have and the skills they have not got. And so we need to make sure that within assessment models, within reflection models, there's regular opportunities, whether it's described as competencies or attributes or strengths or skills, is less important than the fact that your students have regular opportunities to reflect on and articulate those skills within their course and within their curriculum, so that by the time they hit the labour market with all of its dynamism, with the influence of AI, with the different sectors they might go into, that they're ready to be adaptable, they can get through the recruitment processes, and their recruitment processes where increasingly people's degree score or even degree subject is of less importance to those employers than their skills points. And I think there's some really interesting examples going on at places like Kingston, where, for example, they're putting all of their students in an entire year group through recruitment style assessment centres in their second year, so that they can get a readout on those skills, get some real-time employability data, and then better direct their forward provision for those students before they leave the building. And so that by the time they hit employers, they've got a really clear sense of where their strengths and capabilities are and how they map those onto what employers want. So I'll wrap up with those 3 points, really. So it's the new normal. I think it's not a binary thing, it's a spectrum. And also make sure it's centered on skills, because I think we're in this era now of institutional employability where everybody has a role to play in making a student employable. And we've seen that wonderfully through the examples we've heard today. And I think it's very much how people are now approaching design from the ground up of curriculum across the country. Thanks, Nick.
Fantastic. Thank you, Martin. I've been writing down lots of questions I want to pose, but I'm going to resist the temptation because there's lots of questions come in, and I'm going to take them in the upvoted order. And I'm going to take 4 in one go so that before I go back to the panel, so that I can make sure we get a number of rounds of questions in. So Matthew Jays, we're going to turn on your microphone. I hope you can ask your own question. Otherwise, I'll read it out. Be helpful to know what institution you're from, if indeed you're at an institution. Matthew.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can, perfectly.
Fantastic. Hello, everyone. Yeah, thanks so much for allowing me to ask questions. So yeah, really, really interesting, and I look forward to reading the toolkit. I guess based on the AEC, I was interested in the funding model for the student payment aspect. So the proportions that are covered by the UPP Foundation grant, how much the university contributes, and presumably service users don't pay, but obviously interested to know that. And then the kind of employment model that's in place there. And if I'm allowed a third little cheeky question, then whether you've considered expanding out to advising SMEs on energy advice as well.
Great. And probably...
sorry, I forgot to mention, so yeah, University of Huddersfield, London.
Great, brilliant. Some really practical questions there, which we'll put particularly to Ben and Richard, I think. Johnny Rich from the Engineering Professors Council has got the next question. Johnny.
Hi, thank you very much. Actually, I posted my questions just before Martin spoke, and he's given the most excellent and articulate response to what I was asking about. But so I'll then put it to the other panelists about embedding employability, the learning employability and reflection, very importantly, student reflection into the curriculum. You know, how do these initiatives that are co-curricular fit in with embedding and bringing out student reflection and about what they need to align with their own ambitions, and can they claim academic credits from the schemes that have been talked about?
Thank you, Johnny. I'm very interested in that question myself, because we sometimes have the most wonderful interns here at HEPI who do the most amazing projects and then go back and get no credit back at their institution at all. And I sometimes wonder whether that's right or wrong. Sue had a question. Hi, Sue. Where are you from?
Hello, can you hear me? Yes, okay. I'm from UCL, careers from the work-related learning team. Just really super keen to see how we could roll a similar model out, and just interested in knowing more detail about what training the student advisors are given at LSBU. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So really practical. I'm going to take one more question. Emily Richards. It's probably a question for Richard Brabner. Emily Richards. Maybe Emily has tech problems or can't, maybe in somewhere noisy. Emily, I don't think we can hear you, so I might read out your question. Is UPP funding available to other universities to launch their own energy advice centres? So Richard, I might go to you first, because some quite practical questions that you may want to address among those. Don't feel you need to answer every point of every question.
Thanks, Nick. Just take that one first in terms of UPP funding. As you've seen, we've announced today this sort of project to initially expand them at Reading, Wrexham and Kingston, which is obviously a group of institutions which the team at LSBU have sort of created together for that expanded project. I think at this stage, this is sort of next stage of this partnership and project, and over the next couple of years. And obviously, I'm leaving UPP, as Nick mentioned, in July, so it's not going to be for me to determine what it does in the future. But if that's a successful project and there's an opportunity to turn it into a more significant initiative, then obviously that would be something that would be worthy of a conversation, either it's UPP or bigger funders themselves, I suppose. In terms of a couple of other things, I think Ben is the best place to talk about some of the practicalities that was in that first question, so I'll leave that to him. Just pick up on Johnny's question around credit bearing. I think Chris will correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the EACs are credit bearing in that sense. We do have a project that we've been funding at Exeter University where undergraduates go and tutor year 8 pupils in literacy. as a sort of tutoring program. Now, this is a different project. They're not paid, but it is credit bearing. And it's open to all undergraduates as a sort of option module that they can take. And they'll do lots of training and then 10 hours of tutoring in local schools. And then obviously assessed at the end of that through the reflective learning piece. So that's a different type of model for service learning and like the EACs, and I think that works really well too. So very keen for these type of activities in addition to their core curriculum to be assessed and be part of the curriculum, because that's something which we're seeing both with our student futures work and some of the widening participation inquiry that we're currently undertaking, is that there is a real inequalities within the student experience in the types of student that can really embrace the sort of extra or super curricular activities which we know are so important for personal development and employability. And so if there's ways in which we can link to employability and embed some of this stuff into the curriculum whilst not undermining the core curriculum, that really will enhance the value of a degree and ensure that student experience, whether you're a residential student, commuter student, those from less advantaged backgrounds, can really participate.
Brilliant. Thanks, Richard. Very practical guidance and advice there. Lynn, I know you have to leave in a moment, so I'm going to go to you next before I go to Ben. Lynn, anything else you want, or anything else you want to get off your chest?
Well, slightly, because I'm keen to talk. Great questions. So we are looking at credit bearing, and it would be an integrated part of a unit, an undergraduate course. So some hours are not going to be spent on doing something else because it will come in to be spent on doing this. So they would either get a 10 or 20 credit unit as a result of it. That's currently being piloted. So that's probably why we don't pay our students at this point. But yeah, we're making sure that is the way to do it, really, as opposed to an optional extra, and that it is there for an entitlement for all, and the DAS requirements, the disability service, really advising on the methods of assessment. So we will assess our students for impact on themselves, and that will draw on those reflective skills. They'll need to write, whether it's an essay, presentation, whatever they might need, in the similar way that they would do for other parts of their degree, and that would be assessed at scale, rubrics and everything else. That's very much the way that we're looking at working at it at scale. So it's quite maybe a slightly different model to the one that was described with the Energy Centre. But again, it's fledgling at this point.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lynn, and thanks for your input to the session. Good luck with Senate in a moment. Ben, over to you.
Just on are we financially sustainable? We are at the moment. We get some funding from Southwark Council, and we get some funding from within the university, and that enables us to run a kind of viable energy advice centre. I think one of the things that I'm paying close attention to, energy companies are subject to a levy at the moment, which then is funneled back into supporting people to reduce their energy bills. And something that we're talking about a lot within the centre and externally is, are there sort of bigger pots of money there that might be able to support this kind of work? And could that work across multiple universities? Could that be the next way to scale up by working with energy companies? On the question of whether it's credit bearing or not, it's in the toolkit as is part of my answer, but that we don't have it as credit bearing, but it's really clear that this model could work wonderfully for a credit bearing module. So we'd be delighted to talk to people about that. And then there was one more question, which was about training. And for that, if I can hand over to Chris, who's our training expert, that would be great.
Chris.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for that question. Just to mention about credit bearing, my initial thoughts, whilst we don't do it at the moment, it's a brilliant idea, but what students actually get from the employment, because they're employed as a paid role, it goes on their CV. So, for a year that they've been employed with us, they can actually put in their CV as experience. So in essence, it's sort of compensated in that way. In terms of how students are trained and the recruitment process. So the training goes, it's a peer learning process. We have students that are managing, so they've been with us for longer, so they train the other recruits based on how to use the databases, how to provide advice, where to look for, certain information and how to prove their reports. The recruitment process, we go out to basically when at the beginning of each academic year, we have sets of promotional materials. We go out to student union events, freshers events, where we advertise the positions. And also sometimes in the after the lecture or just in between the lectures, we can announce that we are recruiting.
Thank you, Christina. I'm going to go to Martin and I'm going to do another round of questions. So Martin.
Yeah, I think just the only thing I'd really chip in on this would be a bit of further practical support, I suppose, and then about building on Richard's point about reducing inequality through some of this stuff. One of the other really, well, in fact, two of the other really prominent examples from our recent awards were the University of Teesside and University of East London, both of whom had seen really marked reduction in things like their inequality levels in their graduate outcomes through doing this integrated work with credit-bearing modules within their degrees, integrated employability, and then it being something that just can't be missed because it is within the curriculum. As Richard says, you can do this now, in a way that doesn't dilute curriculum, it doesn't dilute the subject, but you're still bringing things out in a way that simultaneously has assessment elements, but also is bang on point still with the subject and topic.
Thank you, Martin. And of course, we know from all the surveys of applicants, and there'll be a new one out from United Students and HEPI quite soon, that the main reason people put top when they're asked why they're going to higher education is, of course, because they wanted a fulfilling career afterwards. And of course, this could definitely help them achieve that. There are lots of other reasons as well, I know. Let's take a second round of questions. I'm resisting the temptation to ask one of my own, although if I did, it would be around liability. What if you give bad advice and someone wants to take action against the university? Is there an issue around insurance and liability? I don't know, so I'd be interested to know. But I'm going to go to Rachel Cragg, who has put the next most popular question in the list. Hi, Rachel. Where are you from?
Hi, Nick. Rachel Cragg, PVC at the University of Western Scotland. Interesting conversation. I've put a couple of comments in. I think the one about pay has been answered. So I'll go to the one at the end, which is just trying to understand this issue around the credit part and whether there's actually a bigger conversation here about how we give students credit for all sorts of work that they do. So we know a lot of our students work part-time, a lot of them work in any old job that they can find because they need the money desperately, and some work in some very focused levels of employment. And if we could get to the bottom of what those skills are that we're assessing, then we can start to help students to get meaningful employment or necessary employment, but get some recognition of that in terms of where we're going with this. So I just wonder if anybody else has been toying with these thoughts in the way I have, and is there any way we can maybe join the thinking in this space together? Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you. I've got three anonymous questions here, and then one from John Watkins. So the three anonymous questions are: this is a fantastic project, win-win. Are there any pitfalls to avoid, things you'd have done differently if you were starting again? Secondly, given most students now work part-time, is it feasible to do this sort of initiative at scale? What policy support is needed from the DFE, the OFS, or devolved authorities? That has a link, I think, to Rachel's question just now as well. Third anonymous question: one or two examples would illuminate the impact of this welcome activity. So interpret that as you will. I think we had a very clear example of the person who wasn't sure if it was their mobility scooter or their son's gaming, who was which they needed advice around, but maybe there are other forms of examples people can give as well. And then John Watkins. John, I think you are at the University of Law by the look of things from your question. Is that correct? Hi, John.
Yeah, it really was just answering Rachel's question to say that at the University of Law, recognising that engagement's the challenge for students. If you can free up time for them to actually go out and do productive developmental activities, which also, pay if it's paid work, then that is a very powerful thing to be able to do. It's become a very popular module, and one that is more popular because it's credit bearing than if it wasn't. And certainly from an employability engagement perspective, lots of things that we do that are very valuable and highly thought of are not participated in when they are not credit bearing or not paid. So that's certainly been a real benefit, I think. And the employability service coaches those students through that module, which allows us to have greater interaction with them and develop our skills from being advisors into coaches, which is actually very, very helpful.
Great, thank you. Fantastic. We have 5 minutes to get through all of that because we do have a hard cut-off. I'm going to go in reverse order this time. Martin.
I'll have a go at Rachel's question if that's all right. So the point about part-time work, I think it's a really great point. I'm doing a piece of work 10 years ago on a project with the University of Liverpool called Job Shopping, which is all about trying to extract the skills value out of part-time work students were doing alongside work. And I think at the time, I think that's something that we should be focusing more on. John's giving an example there from the University of Law, which is great. I think a lot of universities do this through their employability awards. They credit some of that stuff within employability awards, but obviously that's generally not within curriculum. So I think if we can find models that recognize part-time work, and particularly going back to my point about skills development takes place in any kind of work, and if we can extract the kind of goodness out of that, sort of sweat the asset, if you like, we can bring a lot more value out of that and help students understand and articulate that. But I'd be really open to, within AGCAS, talking to you, Rachel, more about that and looking at whether we can knit something together on that around the country, around, you know, driving the value out of part-time work more into kind of curriculum value and things as well. And my last thought would just be, if anyone wants any more resources on this, we've just published our open access journal, Phoenix, which is an edition all about integrating employability. So if you want more case studies or practical examples that were asked for, there's a whole journal full of them on our website. And you're all members, I think. So
fantastic. Thank you, Martin. And if you're not, join up, I think, is the message. Christina.
Working. I'll look at the are there any pitfalls to avoid? Things would have done differently, I suppose. From the executive team point of view, so as PhD students, we initially took on a role of sort of managing different student teams. We had technical team, marketing team, and outreach teams. And the biggest challenge was actually to stop sort of micromanaging students, because initially it was taking up into our time trying to check the work they've done and ensuring the quality control. But a learning curve. So over a year, sort of practicing, we actually developed our technical director developed a really robust structure how the actual technical advice does things sort of autonomously. So I can now just so the technical director actually is now on that maternity leave, so I can take over both teams, you know, marketing and the technical advice. But I know I can rely on students to self-manage. So.
Great, thank you. That's a very helpful practical answer, I think. Ben.
Yeah, just coming in on the question about risks and whether we have kind of legal advice on this. We went to our legal team and did talk through at length what would work and what wouldn't work, and they advised us that if we're writing a letter, and they've given us a disclaimer to put on the bottom of it, that's a sensible kind of middle ground that doesn't introduce a huge amount of risk. There's one more thing on that we're developing a new scheme to go into people's homes, and we've got thermal cameras for radiators and for leaky windows, things like that. And of course, that brings in a whole new range of potential risks that really we're just thinking through and trying to mitigate just now. So yeah, risk is a factor for this.
I could certainly do that with that in my home. Just before I go to Richard, Esther, your tech wasn't working before, and I don't know if it now is working, but obviously the student perspective is so crucial here, and Christina and Jude we have heard from as well. But Esther, I don't know if you're now able to turn on your mic. No. Or indeed whether, Jude, do you have anything else you'd like to contribute before I go to Richard?
No, I think unless anyone's got any questions about the points I was raising, but that's about it for me.
Well, yeah, thank you, Jude. I think what we'll do is that people are obviously free to email either UPP Foundation or HEPI if they've got follow-up questions that we haven't had time to move on to. Richard, final word from you, and then I'll wind it up.
Thanks, Nick. Just want to say a huge thank you to everyone for participating today, coming along, and obviously the team at LSBU, Ben, Christina, Jude, and Esther. for leading the project. Obviously, Martin and Lynn for participating in the panel. So huge thank you to everybody. I hope it really does inspire some others from other parts of the sector to think about setting up their own EAC.
Well, thank you, Richard. And I should say, of course, one of those red reports behind me was written by Richard about the concept of a one nation university, which was really about how do we get universities closer to society in an age of culture wars. And I think actually this project is one very, very practical way to do that, as indeed, Richard, and many of your other projects at UPPF, such as the work on re-engaging homeless people with education that you did with the University of Chichester, or indeed the report you did with us about how often some people, or how rarely, I should say, some people make it onto university campus, and how we need to fix that. And of course, this is another way, today's project is another way of reintegrating society and universities where that has not always been as closely integrated as there might have been. So I'm going to call the webinar to a halt here. We videoed it. We hope you'll watch it back and share the recording. We hope you'll use the UPPF Foundation toolkit. And HEPI always needs content. So if today's event has triggered opinions you'd want to capture in some other way, think of the HEPI blog and HEPI reports. And my final word, because Richard's already done all the thank yous I wanted to do, is to say the HEPI annual conference is happening next week on the 12th of June, the day after the spending review. And we'll be launching there the Student Academic Experience Survey with Advance HE for 2025, which is highly relevant to this because it talks, for example, about the proportion of students who are doing paid employment outside their course. Some of this is paid, some of this is unpaid, and also how little time sometimes they have for their academic work, their contact hours, their well-being, their value for money perceptions, their views on a range of societal and public policy questions. So if you don't have anything else to do next Thursday, come to the HEPI Annual Conference. Thank you again to everybody for being involved. See you soon.